to the Food Startups Podcast, connecting the opaque world of food startups.
Hello, guys, and welcome to episode number 66. I'm really excited because we have Bob Moore of Bob's Red Mill, the internationally known company. They're in 80 countries, huge success, and it's a long time in the making. Probably the most impressive thing is that a few years ago, he decided to donate the company. I wouldn't say donate, but he's given all the shares to his employees. It's an employee-owned company. It's kind of a relic in the sense that people have very long tenures at the company. You know, today in 2015, people are switching from jobs and there's not as much dependability, but Bob's Red Mill is the exception. I think, having received his book before I did the interview, it's just really impressive to me. A couple of things I'd like to go over before we get into the conversation with Bob. One is in 1988 in Oregon, there was a fire that burned down his mill, and he basically had to start over at the age of 59, almost 60 years old. And today it's where it is because he rebuilt everything except for maybe a few millstones. But it's just incredible to me that the perseverance he has to keep going. And today he's 86 and he still has the same enthusiasm and energy as a young person. He continues to read. He's hands-on with his plant. He's got over 400 employees. So it's great just to chat with him, to see how he thinks and to see how he sees the world. He's gone through a variety of jobs in his life. He's done other entrepreneurial projects. He started at a gas station, multiple gas stations. He's been in sales. And he's always been a tinker, he's very mechanical. And one of the other cool things to me is that he happened to find a book in, maybe 40, 50 years ago called John Goffe's, G-A-F-F-E, John Goffe's Mill. And because he finds this book in a library, he reads about the mill, which even at the time that he found it, these mills were kind of, these traditional style mills were kind of antiques. They weren't really operating. But because he finds this book, it inspires him to make what is Bob's Red Mill today. So to me, that's just amazing and emphasizes the power of reading that we've talked about. We've had a lot of authors on the show, and I always send out reading recommendations in the email list. Well, besides that, I think it's interesting to see from his book that, he was right after World War II, he was in the military. He has done a lot of things. He's a great piano player, really talented guy. Also interesting, he was not a very good student growing up. He could never learn how to write cursive, but that obviously didn't stop him from the success he has today. And he later put a higher value on education. Well, listen, guys, I think you're really going to enjoy hearing him talk and how he sees the world. So thank you so much and enjoy the show. So, Bob, a very, very long time ago, you were working at May Company, the furniture warehouse, unloading freight. And you were promoted to department manager. And as mentioned in your book, you called it a defining moment in your life. And
I was 16 years old. And the reason that happened, I'm sure I had something to do with it. I was a little more mature than an awful lot of people my age, and I don't know why, it just was. But the war was on. This was 16. Let's see, that was about 1944, and the people, the guys, I guess we could speak that way at that time. The guys who did that kind of work were all at war. And, a lot of them losing their lives and stuff. And the women were working in defense plants. So it left a business like a warehouse, a department store warehouse with no one to tap to do the job. And I was the great experiment, I guess, by the warehouse staff. They thought I could do it. And, they challenged me. It was amazing how I was challenged by. What I was challenged by, Matt, probably more than anything, was the $1 an hour. Wages at that time from, that lower grade of work were probably 50. If you went from 45 cents an hour to 50 cents an hour, it was a big deal.
What's the equivalent of that today? Like a 5-cent raise. What is that like in 2015?
Well, I don't know what it would be now, but at any rate, I remember getting the $1 an hour, and I thought it was like, I couldn't believe $1 an hour. I didn't know anyone who made $1 an hour, and I was only 16. So anyway, I don't think I've ever worked harder in my life. I worked like a frenzy because I couldn't believe it. It was a great experience for me, Matt. That was, people get breaks in their life, and it's good that they recognize it. And I have always recognized that Shorty Odell was my boss at the time. And Shorty he was prouder of me than I was. It was nice. It was a good thing. And, I worked there until I went in the Army, and it was really nice. I had a car, and of course the job afforded me enough money to keep a car. But it was good. I worked after school, and I worked Saturdays. I don't remember, probably 25 hours a week, something like that. So that $25, can you imagine that? That was like I was rich.
Wow.
I bought all my own clothes. I remember my dad taking me down to Miller's, name of a men's store, and opening an account for me so that I could buy. It was so funny. Get me, that way I could buy on time and pay it weekly or whatever I did. I was really growing up fast at that age. And I think, what, if the war hadn't have been on, if it was, 1934 instead of 1944, it would have been quite different. I would never had the opportunity to step up to a manager. I had to do all the ordering and filling all the orders, and then and keep the stock up and everything. It was quite a responsibility, and I didn't have a lot of time to do it. I worked pretty hard. I think they got their money's worth. Man, I think they got their money's worth.
Sounds like, and you developed a work ethic at a really young age. Now, in your book...
Well, my dad was that. My dad was a sticker for giving more than you get, and he philosophized a lot, and we'd sit in the evening and he'd talk about his philosophy of working hard and turning out good work and whatnot. So I was fortunate enough to have both my parents, not that my mom wasn't the same way, but I was surrounded with good, positive stuff. I still love my dad dearly. I can well up and cry by just thinking about him. He was a great fellow. But he smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and that's not very good. And it killed him at 49. So I still bemoan the fact that I lost such a swell person at such a young age. But anyway, now I'm starting to cry. Don't ask me about my dad.
All right. Let's move on to a question. You talked about, let's say, smoking cigarettes and the harm that tobacco companies cause. But, on a positive note, I know that you were exposed to a book by Adele Davis about nutrition. And I just wanted to have you state your philosophy on nutrition and what you believe on what people should eat.
Well, that's a broad statement, Matt. It's a little what my philosophy and beliefs are. I think that highly processed foods, and Nancy came up with something that really has stuck in my craw about rice. She was Googling some facts of grains and things about the world because I had to give a talk, and she came up with a figure of how much rice was grown in the past 100 years in the world. I don't know how they come up with those figures, whether they're estimates or not, but for want of proof, it looked pretty valid, and so we went with it. And the amount of rice that's grown in the world in 100 years is a whole lot. I mean, the figures are zeros clear across the page and around the back. But the interesting part is that all of that rice was turned into white rice. And how do they take rice and turn it into white rice? They put it through cutters, and they take skin off the outer layer of bran and the germ, essentially making it starch and taking away, in my view, perhaps this is strictly my view, maybe 50 to 60 to 70% of the nutritional value, the fiber and the oils and vitamins that are in the germ. And then they sell that white rice to the rest of the world, all the world. And the bran and the germ are disposed of in animal food in some cases, and in other cases actually just sort of flushed down the drain. I mean, it depends on what country you're in and what period of time in the 100 years you're talking about. There's been a lot of movement around. But at any rate, Nancy came up with a figure that's almost hard to express. If you imagine a globe of the Earth about 25,000 miles around, and then you imagine 54 railroad tracks side by side going all the way around the Earth. That's 54 times 25,000. And then you imagine it filled with rail cars, and those rail cars filled with bran and germ. That is how much nutrients, the fiber, all of the wondrous vitamins that come out of the germ, that is what the Earth, the people of the Earth, have missed in the last 100 years. That's part of the reason we have massive ill health and some of the things we have in the world today. Certainly diabetes, We have overweight. There are many, many, and heart problems. That would be called a Western diet, that causes heart problems. And all of those things were short-circuited from the human race just on rice alone. And then when you add wheat, which actually was a greater figure, we didn't work that one out. It's just a staggering amount. And that's still going on today, Matt. And those are figures and things that Adele Davis, so she didn't bring all those things out. That was left at later dates when we had more accounting. We're able to keep track of things a little better. But Adele Davis in her book talked about white flour, sugar, white rice, all these things. She was writing in the 1940s and 50s. I actually have these books. They're sitting on a bookshelf just right beside me here. I can pull them out. I said, let's get well. Let's cook it right. Let's eat right and keep fit. Then the Rodell established Prevention Magazine. He wrote a book called The Health Builder in this 1950. So we're looking, at 60 plus years ago. Yeah, 65 years ago. And he mentions all these things in there. All the things that are wrong with our Western society, too much fat, salt, sugar, all these kind of things are all mentioned in there. So it wasn't me that caught on to this. It was my wife. I hope that book didn't say it was me. I just picked up on it. I thought it was a good idea after she introduced it to her family, me and our 3 sons. So it was not, I don't make it sound like it was all my idea. I didn't think I had any ideas at that time. I was busy trying to earn a living for my family, which I've always taken very seriously. And Charlie, my wife, was busy reading and being concerned about cooking the right things and obtaining things. We had little health food stores even back in the 40s and 50s, and she peopled those and took me with her. And I'm so happy that, so many times we reject the good things because it's new and whatnot. And I don't know. I'm so happy I didn't, because I think part of my being in this business today is because I listened and I did really enjoy eating whole grains. I mean, even then, and her bread was so good. I have some, nice memories of her care for the family and doing things which were a little different than everyone else was doing. So I don't know. Anyway, is that anything like what you want to hear, Matt?
Yeah. And Bob, I think to me, I'm just really impressed by Adele Davis, because all these things that she mentioned in her book proved to be true in terms of nutrition. And still today, it's 70 years later, it's still a challenge to get the message out about, refined carbs and refined grains. And so I'll give you a more specific question. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Nancy and I had breakfast right here at my office. She had our 6-grain cereal.
Grain cereal with blueberries on it.
Yeah,
and then we put flaxseed meal on our cereal.
And then I had our thick rolled oats, our extra thick. They're real chewy and meaty, and I love them. But yesterday morning, we basically had the same thing, didn't we? Mm-hmm. We have so much work to do, Matt, that we started early this morning. And we have the company owns a restaurant up the street, and I stopped there at 6:30 this morning and had them and ordered breakfast for us. We furnish breakfast one day a week here at the plant for everybody. That's Tuesday, but we've eaten Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Oh, this is Thursday. Uh-huh. Tuesday was the Tuesday morning meeting, and we had, I think it was thick oats.
Yeah, I think
it was the extra thick oats. I thought it was just extremely tasty.
Our retail outlet down the street, there's only one in the world, and it's the only place that all of our products, 400 plus products, are there in one place in all sizes. Because we have so many, it's just our retail outlet, and then it's just local people come, but people from really many other countries have been there too, because it's on the tourist destination information guides for this county. So we get a lot of people from all over the United States and really all over the world. But we have a restaurant there and a bakery and a cookbook section, and so it's a nice place, and we order food to go there once in a while.
That's great. And Nancy and Bob, I find it really interesting in your book, the book of People Over Profit, how you've kind of jumped into a couple of things kind of head on without knowing exactly how it was going to turn out.
I didn't like that, Matt. Did you jump into things when you went to South America you didn't know how it was going to turn out?
Bob, I just jumped into another industry that's kind of been a theme of my short life so far. And it's really interesting because you talked about like starting the gas station, and you didn't have I wouldn't call it necessarily logical. It's more kind of just like, I knew I needed to do it. I knew I wanted to be in business for myself. And
that's what's driven me a lot.
And Bob, so the really, really interesting thing to me also is this, you find this book called, I believe, John Goff's Mill, about the ancient style of, the milling process. And that kind of, finding that book in a library one day changed everything. Tell us about how you felt when you read that book and what made you say, yes, I'm going to start. And even at the time when you found the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, that was still kind of an antique thing. It wasn't that common even when you found the book.
Well, isn't that common today? No, it wasn't. Actually, I have the book in front of me. I keep it on my shelf on my desk always because Nancy found one on the website. And it was an old library book. It shows in the back that it was rejected. When nobody checked it out. It was checked out 8/10 of 56, and then it was checked out the next time 10/14 of 1977. And I guess they thought twice in that period of time.
Twice in over 20 years.
Yeah, was not enough to keep the book on the shelf, and it ended up in, I guess, on a Google thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How did you
I found several copies at the bottom.
We bought several, but this one is just exactly like the book that was on the library table that I found when I just picked it up, and it's a signed copy, which is another nice thing. But anyway, I actually read portions of this book sometimes. It's here's a quote from page 168, and he had just gotten his mill going. This was for the first time, and I read this the other day at our meeting. I dumped a bushel of whole wheat into the hopper and turned the water on full gate. With gathering speed, the ungainly arrangement of machinery came to life. I opened a slide valve under the hopper, admitting a stream of grain into the eye of the millstones. Flour dust poured out of every cranny, rose into the air, and enveloped us in a sweet-smelling cloud. The millstones growled a hollow bass. The rich whole-grain flour poured from the spout into the waiting bag. I caught a handful of the rich wholemeal. It was in a fine state and lively. I don't know what he meant by lively, but at any rate, those were very inspirational to my wife and to me when we read these in probably 1960 something or other, when I ran across this book. So I guess if you're in the right mood, and then there's a picture of a delightful pencil drawing of his mill and his family standing there while he's grinding. It's a delightful. The book is extremely nice. It's a very nice book. I'm very pleased and happy that it was printed. There's nothing complicated about it, nor do I feel there's anything terribly complicated about my life either. So anyway, yeah, I love it. Called John Goffey's Mill by George Woodbury. George Woodbury's mother was a Goffey, but he lost the name Goffey through his mother's married to a fellow by the name of Woodbury. So that's why he is a Goffey, but his name is Woodbury.
He inherited it.
Yeah, so the property was about 400 acres. And the mill is still there, but nothing else. It's all turned into I don't know. I got a report on it one time a while back.
Like a shopping area.
Yeah, shopping area.
They want to make it more of a tourist attraction.
It's close to Manchester, New Hampshire. So I guess the town just grew around it.
Gotcha.
I haven't been there, but I've visited lots of other old water-powered mills, lots of them all around the world. I love to. It's a kind of a hobby.
And Bob, you also had a mentor on the East Coast that helped you in getting your mill set up, correct?
Dewey Sheets he had a mill called the Wildcat Mill in Cutler, Indiana. I've never been there. The building is a museum now, and I have a whole series of pictures on it in my picture portfolio, enough that I didn't feel that I necessarily needed to go there. And Dewey came out and visited me and showed me the stones and how to do some things. He was incredible. He did all of this without no strings attached. My whole life is filled with. That's why I have to give myself, because people have given so much to me and haven't expected anything in return. So that's why I gave the company to my employees and why we share the profits of the company and a few things. I'll never pay it back, Matt. It's been a great experience.
Right on. And Bob, so I think in giving back, it would be great for our audience, touch down on some points of adversity. Now, in the late 1980s, your mill was burned down. and you were able to bring it back to how strong it is today.
I didn't bring that mill back, Matt. I didn't bring that mill back. It was on 2 acres, and it was all wood, and it was quite susceptible to a fire. And when it was purposefully burned, it was pretty difficult to think about bringing it back. So we had two questions. Number one, whether we were going to stay there, try to rebuild the mill, which turned out to be impossible, or to just not be in business anymore. We did have some insurance, but I had at that time close to 20 people, and they all seemed to enjoy working for me. Most of them stayed with me until they retired. Some of them are still with me today. I've got, 4 or 5 that have been with me. And then Wesley, he was with me all through that, and he just died this year. And Mickey, and I've had any number of wonderful people who just stayed with me, and we moved to a different location, and that's a much larger one, and continued the business. That's what's happened anyway.
Gotcha. Listen, Bob, so I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I wanted to finish off with one final question.
Sure.
You mentioned in the book, or it was mentioned about you in the book, that you usually have a half dozen books that you're reading at one time. What books are you reading right now?
It probably doesn't make much sense to you. I'm looking at it right now. It's called Milestones of Aviation, and it's a great, big, thick book, and it tells the history of airplanes and flight and all. And part of the reason that I'm interested in is I have 3 sons, and 2 of them have airplanes, private airplanes. And I just recently took a week's flight trip with my oldest son, Ken, across the United States. We traveled 4,400 miles, I think we figured.
Round trip.
Yeah, round trip. And we were just together in a small airplane, and it was just a wonderful experience because with the earphones and all that on, you can speak intimately, even though there's a great deal of noise. So the father-son time together it's just very special. And we visited Oshkosh, and where they had a big fly-in, and we enjoyed the time together. So it left an extremely pleasant flavor in my mouth about airplanes. So Milestones of Aviation is the history of aviation. I'm only 20 or 30 pages into it. I have sitting on my desk the Bible, which I enjoy reading. I have some concordances and stuff for the sake of, and some of the, I have to read the milling journals. It's important that I know what the industry is doing. As president of the company, I'm very active, and I have to keep up on things, new things, what my competitors are doing, and what I should be doing. And so there's a lot of reading to do at any rate. So, and at home I have sitting on the counter a book that Nancy and I got. We did a trade show in London here earlier in the year. Our company went over and had a booth at what was the name of that trade show?
It was called the Allergy Free From Show. So everything there, food and other types of things, were all free from allergens.
The day before the show, we had a day, and we took a tour bus, to Stonehenge, a fascination of both of us. And I bought several books because the area around Stonehenge was and still is an aviation place. There's a lot of planes and things. And the book is World War I aircraft in and around the Stonehenge area. That's not the name of the book, but it's quite fascinating because those airplanes were almost like kites. They were so light, and the history of flight in the world in that time, in 1914 to 1918, has been a fascination because it really brought the airplane to its fore. And this is a kind of a small piece of how airplanes were developed, and it's quite interesting. I'm about halfway through it, and it's on my bedside stand when I can't sleep, which is now and then. I like to read, so there's some great stuff. I have lots of good books.
Fantastic. Well, Bob, I know you're a very busy man and you need to get back to your 400 plus employees and the mill and everything. So thank you so much for taking the time today. We really appreciate and are grateful to have you on the show. And
thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.